Can we get an offensive hero? What are you doing playing that character on defense? Now, for those of you who grinded Overwatch 1 back since it came out, you remember the defensive and offensive character categories back in old Overwatch, where there were certain heroes in the DPS slot that were defensive heroes that you're supposed to play on defense, and certain heroes that you were supposed to play on attack. However, this was one of the most controversial and confusing things about Overwatch, period, back in the day. For defense, we had Bastion, Hanzo, Torb, Widowmaker, Mei, and Junkrat. And some of these characters might make a little bit of sense, right? Mei may be a little bit better on defense around choke points. Still perfectly playable on attack, but that was the idea. Torb, having a turret set up, gave you a little bit more value set up in a position. Same thing for Junkrat. A little bit more value on defense for sure, but still playable on attack in a lot of situations. But characters like Hanzo and Widowmaker, both of these characters perfectly playable on both attack and defense, especially Widowmaker, which is probably better on attack, which is kind of crazy that this character was in the defensive category. Not only that, Blizzard actually gave you a little indicator if you didn't have an offensive or defensive character on your team. So this actually super misled players. And to move on to the offensive category, we had Genji, Cassidy, Pharah, Reaper, Soldier, Tracer. So imagine back in the day, like Dive was amazing, and thinking that you could not be playing a character like Tracer or Genji on defense. Seems ridiculous, right? Well, it really was. It really was. Now, in addition to that, we had the support category that had Mercy, Lucio, Zen, and Sim, and Sim did not have any healing. So it was Mercy, Lucio, and Zen as the only supports we had. So a lot of the traditional like main support, off support paradigm didn't really exist because we didn't really have supports that would occupy that space. And back then, Mercy was a character that would oftentimes be used to heal up everybody, including tanks. You couldn't even play her like oftentimes they play her now, where she's someone that primarily pockets a DPS and damage boosts, and that's where the vast majority of your utility comes from. That just doesn't exist, and most of the time, players would just play characters really wrong, not understand what they were even used for, and most of this was actually perpetuated by Blizzard themselves. Let's think about this. There were 3 supports that could actually heal, and they were freaking over 10 DPS. Offensive, defensive, combine them together, they just massively overprinted DPS and didn't really create any freaking supports or healers, very few tanks, and it's crazy because we're still dealing with the ramifications of that now when the DPS category just has so many more characters than every other role, which is just crazy. And it all starts back then with the idea that we're supposed to have defensive and offensive characters. Today we know that the only thing that really matters is winning team fights. You win a team fight, you capture objectives. You win a team fight, you defend objectives. It doesn't matter whether or not you're playing attack or defensive characters, and just because a character might have some amount of extra value on attack or on defense doesn't mean that that character is unplayable by any metric. And it's really strange to think about the game that way when that kind of rule of thought has been so far removed that no one even really thinks about the game like that at all anymore. Now, one of the things that this shows, if anything, is that back in the day, Overwatch players had zero tactical knowledge compared to today. Not even the developers themselves understood Overwatch enough to properly tell people what was the truth. And if someone from today like went back in time and exists right around that 2016 time period, the stuff that they would teach players would be so controversial and outside of the norm that it would just revolutionize Overwatch forever. I mean, remember the medal system where players would get gold damage and golden limbs, which actively encouraged players to play incorrectly. And you combine that with the fact that back in the day, the average mechanical skill of every player was way lower. If you don't believe me, go look at a top 500 or Grandmaster Dragonblade in the first year of Overwatch being out and compare it to the average plat player's Dragonblade of today. It's like 10 times faster. So this is why Overwatch was such a crazy game, such a crazy environment, because not only did no one understand like proper strategy, it took so long for people to figure out how to play characters, how to play strats, what those things meant, but the mechanical skill of every player was overall low and developed slowly with time. Now, I'm not going to give just Overwatch credit for improving mechanical skill of everyone. I think the boom of esports did that. Games like Fortnite blowing up and other games that really push mechanical skill further along collectively. And I think it's really funny kind of going back and looking at perhaps some of the lack of understanding, even from the developers themselves, was part of the reason why this game felt so unsolved for so long, and maybe contributed to it actually feeling fun for so long, which is kind of a weird concept, because today it feels like metas are solved so quickly in every game. Things are kind of decided and figured out so fast that there's less exploration. And even though people were doing things wrong, it might have actually created like this universal learning situation that was good. I don't know. It's kind of a weird thing to think about, but let me know down below how you feel about offensive defensive heroes. What story about Overwatch history do you want me to cover next? Smash that like, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.